Okay.
So right now we're at 55 dial-in points. We've got teams of people spread across North America, a little bit of Europe, all watching this all at the same time. I want to do just a quick introduction, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave. I've known of Dave for many, many years. He's a Nashvilleian. I've read lots of articles. He's been a published author. I've seen lots of information about this guy, and he reached out to me recently and came over and we spent 2 or 3 hours together at the house chatting about what he was doing and his successes, and then this very elusive thing that we deal with called communications. And anytime that we're working with companies and all around the planet, we do surveys and we gather data, and communication always seems to be at the top of the list as a challenge inside of an organization. So I asked Dave would he join us today and share with our members how to be better communicators, what it means to be a master communicator. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave and let you take it from here, brother.
Thank you very much, Andy. Yeah, it's great to be here. I've been very excited for this, so I've really been looking forward to it. So thank you, everybody. We've got 70 people here so far, and the number keeps growing. And of course, as you mentioned, we have people in groups like Kate with 6 people in TC. I don't know what TC means. What is TC? There is, if you're just joining us, there is a little chat window. So if you click more and chat, you can ask questions or comment and things like that. I might even ask you a question while I'm doing this thing. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I am Dave Delaney, and this is the Master Communicator's Secret Weapon. And it begins with a story. So let's do this. So several years ago, my book came out. My book is called New Business Networking. And, I was doing gigs speaking about the book in different venues and things. And a very large healthcare company hired me to come out and speak about networking, specifically about using LinkedIn to grow your network for business and for your career. And so I went to the event. By the way, this picture is not me. It's a stock photo, in case you're wondering. But then you can see me in the little window, so I don't have black hair. So I went to this event at this healthcare company in their lobby, or in their room, their huge auditorium, I should say. And there was 200 senior management in the room. Now, if you've ever done public speaking, this might resonate with you. If you haven't done public speaking yet, this will also probably resonate with you. As a speaker, as a general rule, you should try to always stick to using your own equipment. And sadly, in this case, that was not the case. I went up, and as I said, there was about 200 people there. And just before we started, they said, "Oh, Dave, by the way, we're going to stream this live to 20,000 employees." So this presentation that I was about to do on stage in front of an auditorium of 200 senior management at a healthcare company was also going to be streamed to 20,000 people. So no pressure at all. And as I got set up beforehand to test everything, they gave me this clicker. It wasn't this clicker specifically, but it looked something like this. Not the schwankiest high-tech hardware that I was used to using. And as I said, I often try to avoid using other people's equipment, and you're about to find out why. So I'm in the room, and I'm doing my presentation now. And again, this is about growing your network with LinkedIn. I do a lot of LinkedIn training and consulting about using LinkedIn for your business. So I'm speaking about LinkedIn, and I asked the audience, I said, how many people do you think use LinkedIn? And I was expecting maybe one person to raise their hand. And instead, like all 200 people in the auditorium raised their hands. It's like they all knew what the answer was. And then this one fella yelled 225 million. And sure enough, it was 225 million at the time. It's now over 500 million, I think about 600 million. But my slide had, and that was, I used this slide with this woman's face that you're seeing right now, because that was the actual slide that I used in that presentation. You see, I like to surprise people sometimes with some interesting slides in my presentations, because I love storytelling and I love speaking. But unfortunately, this slide advanced on its own time. You see, the clicker that they gave me, was on a timer that I was not aware of. And so the slides in my presentation were advancing in their own time. I had no control over when my slides would advance, which made telling a story like this pretty challenging and just horrific, to be honest. So I pulled it off though somehow. I don't know how I did, but I pulled it off. In fact, the woman from the company actually left me a really wonderful LinkedIn recommendation on my profile, which I appreciated. But it was pretty crazy because my slides were advancing on their own. So I got home that night and I fixed myself a stiff drink and started reflecting on the day and what had happened during that presentation. And what I realized was I had a secret weapon that I hadn't thought about. And I never really realized that this secret weapon was a secret weapon. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today, here to share with you what that secret weapon is and how it can help you in your communication. And that secret weapon is improv. I don't know, feel free to chat with me if you like in the window here. But improv saved me. You see, many years ago, I studied improv comedy at Second City in Toronto. And if you know improv or if you know comedy, then you're familiar with Second City, but they're probably the most reputable, well-known comedy shops in the world. They originated in Chicago, and tons of famous people that you would know graduated out of Second City. So I studied Second City because I'm from Toronto originally. And I studied at Second City, and it was during the evening, and I learned all these things, and I had an amazing experience from this. So from Second City improv training, after doing that, after graduating through their program, I moved to London for a summer, and I performed improv in London. And here's an example, just very quickly. I went up to an improv show, and after the show, I went up to the cast members, and I said, "Hey, is there any way I could do improv with you?" And they said, "No, go back to your seat." You freak, as you would expect. But then one of them said, "Have you ever done it before?" And I said, "Yeah, I trained with Second City." And they're like, "Oh," they all stopped what they were doing. They all looked up at me and they said, "Oh, yeah, come join us. We'd love to have you." And I came back and I performed with them a couple times. And from London, I moved to Galway, Ireland. And I lived there for a couple of years. I even met my wife there, and that's a different story. But in Galway, I actually created my own improv troupe called The Lads, and we performed every Thursday night. That's me, one of the bald people. Apparently, the guys didn't have hair for some strange reason. And I performed improv every Thursday night at a wine bar that I'd set up with a group that I put together. And it was an amazing experience. And I learned so much and many lessons that I'm going to share with you today. One thing I wanted to add, though, very quickly is when I was in Ireland, I had a couple people from different businesses reach out to me after seeing a show and said, "Hey, do you teach improv to businesses?" And I said, "Okay, sure." And I went and did some improv workshops. Now, this is 1998, 99, so a little while back. So today I'm going to talk about 3 key improv concepts. And by the way, if you are completely introverted or shy, you can still use these improv concepts, these ideas around how to improve your business, your career with improv. So stay with me. Even if you're like, "Oh, good gosh, no, this is not for me." It is, trust me. If you're pitching investors, if you're meeting your board of directors, if you're talking to clients, if you're talking to prospects, if you're talking to your employees. Side note here, you can also use improv when talking to your spouse. So stick with me, because 3 key improv concepts I'm going to talk about today, the secret weapon, are to lead with acceptance. So you're going to learn how to lead with acceptance. You're going to learn how to be a better listener. And you're going to learn how you should not fear failure. So I hope you guys are excited. I'm going to keep going here. These are the things I'm going to leave you with today. So here we go. Acceptance. Chickens. The first course, and if you've done improv classes before, you might have experienced something similar to this. It was a little crazy, but I'll explain. When I did my first course at Second City in Toronto, this was in the evening after work, and I was in a room with about 30 other people, and everybody was wearing their work clothes, kind of, button down shirts and slacks or dresses from the office, that kind of thing. And so we'd all come from work to take this class. By the way, nobody knew each other, with a few exceptions, but most people didn't know each other. So imagine this, you're standing in a room with about 20, 30 other people, all taking an improv class, and the improv teacher tells everybody to act like a chicken and walk randomly around the room. And straight away, I'll tell you that some people did not show up for the next class the next week, I assure you. They were pretty freaked out about the whole situation, but you had to do it. You had to walk around like a chicken. So that's what we did. We were clucking around. We had our elbows in, tucked in, kind of crouched down, walking around aimlessly, moving our necks and our heads, trying to do our best chicken impersonations. And it was, I will be the first to admit, it was extremely awkward. But it taught us something, and it's a fundamental rule of improv, and it's a fundamental rule of part of the secret weapon, and it is the rule of yes and you probably might have read about this before. There's growing articles, many stories about how improv can help communication, does help communication, and it's using yes and to do this. So for example, when there are two actors on stage in an improv scene, one of the actors receives an object. So the people in the chat room right now, just chat me any object, any random object. Umbrella, thank you. So let's say I have an umbrella. Pencil's good too. Let's say I'm holding an umbrella on the stage. Of course, it's invisible, right? So I'm holding the umbrella, and the other actor comes in. Now, this is part of that what we learn in improv is to accept and then move on from there and to grow the scene. So you say yes and. So you start the scene, I come out with this umbrella and I say, I've got this great umbrella. And the other actor says, and you have to start every sentence with yes and. So the other actor says, yes, and it looks like it might rain today. And I say, yes, and there's enough room for you to come under if you need it. And the other actor says, yes, and it's going to start pouring any second. And I say, yes, and I better open it. And I open it up, and the other one says, yes, and I'm getting wet. I got to get under there. And they come and they climb under the umbrella with me, and we continue the scene. So by saying yes, and you accept and you move the scene forward. Now, picture this in work. I once worked for a company, and I'm in the boardroom. I just started there. And the CEO is there, and the CEO asks anybody if they have any ideas for something. And I had this idea. And so I kind of timidly put up my hand, and the CEO looked at me and said, "What's your idea, Dave?" And I explained this idea that I thought was a pretty good idea. And he laughed, and he said, "That's a stupid idea." And I sunk in my seat, and you can imagine how many times I put up my hand again while I was at that company. I never accepted, I never had the courage to do that again because I felt like a jerk. If the CEO had thought about yes and had learned about improv and communication, they could have done something differently. Now, I'm not, the term yes and might be a little misleading in the sense that you should accept everything. Certainly every business cannot accept every idea. However, there's a way that you can discuss it in a much more empowering, accepting, helpful way. So for example, the CEO could have said, yes, and Dave, why don't you get with sales and see if this is a good idea that they would like to do? Or yes, and let's hold on that idea until Q1 and revisit it then when budgets are properly allocated and we can, we have the time and energy to discuss it again. Or yes, and let's talk about it after the meeting and see what other ideas we could come from that. Or yes, and let's do it this way. Or yes, and let's do it that way. So for example, with all those examples, he would have made me feel empowered. And even if the idea didn't come to fruition, I still would have felt really good about the whole experience. And I bet some of you are feeling this way too in some of the experiences that you've had. And I hope that you're thinking about how you can use this with your own staff, with your own team, with your own prospects. For example, with a prospect may say, hey, can you do this? And instead of saying, no, we don't do that, you could say, yes, and we could do that if we did this. Or yes, and let me talk to my business development team and see if that's something we can help you with. Instead of saying just no. Vern Harnish has this great line: there are no straight lines in nature or in business. And this is how improv can help you, right? Because you don't know. It's unpredictable. There are no straight lines. And knowing improv and the rules of improv and understanding the stuff that I'm talking to you about today will help you in thinking through the future for you, the future for your business. And you never know what will come from it, because as it applies to straight lines and the fact that there are no straight lines, you never know what will come. So for example, when a customer asks you for something and you accept that opportunity and you talk to that customer, what can come from that is a whole different line of products or a whole different line of services that you didn't really think about before. And this is called, in startup world, it's called a pivot, right? It's when you pivot your business to something else based on the needs of the market or the demands of the market. Of course, you guys know these devices probably. You might know only one of them, depending how old you are. But of course, these are Nintendo products, and I grew up with the one on the left a little bit, and the one on the right, I'm now playing with my son. So Nintendo, of course, we all know and probably love to some extent. But Nintendo did not start as a video game maker. They started as a card game maker way back in the day. I wish I had the year in front of me, but it wasn't until the 1970s that they entered the video game sort of market and then followed along its own path to fame and fortune. So they followed industry trends. They followed new requests from customers and things. And then, that ended up with Nintendo as we know them today. Another example of this would be these guys. These guys who started, of course, Starbucks. And Starbucks originally started in 1971 selling coffee beans and espresso makers. That's it. They didn't have stores. But they listened to their customers and they looked at market indicators and realized that the company needs to pivot in order to become a successful story as they are today, right? So everybody has a Starbucks around the corner now. And it's because they followed trends and they listened to opportunities instead of being closed off and unaccepting. They listened and they accepted. And that's what yes and can teach you. Another thing with improv is you learn to listen. And by the way, if you're not familiar with this, it's a fun fact. Listen is an anagram for the word silent. You can see it there in the letters, right? So you can move them around and be silent as you listen to somebody. And a lot of times we don't listen. My wife will be the first to agree with that. And in order to listen effectively, we can follow this acronym for the word listen. I'm going to walk you through that now. And this is what improv actors do as well on stage. And it's not just about improv, by the way, of course, right? This is about you at a networking event, you at a conference, you with your employees, you with your staff or your sales team, or you with your actual customers. It's about looking interested, right? So let's say you're talking to somebody at a networking event or a conference. You're going to look interested, hopefully. That means you smile. That means you look them in the eye as they're talking to you, not stare them down in a weird, awkward way. But you want to look at them. You want to look interested. You want to smile, nod, shake your head. Mm-hmm. You want to involve yourself by responding to what the person is saying to you. So rather than just staring at them, you say, yes, interesting. What happened next? Oh, how did that make you feel? Asking these additional open-ended questions to allow the person to continue talking to you. Involve yourself by responding. The S in listen stands for staying on target. Who's the target that you're talking to? The target is the person that you're talking to. That is the target. So staying on target means let them do the bulk of the talking. And it's tough. I struggle with this sometimes too, when you get these awkward silences, these moments that are just quiet for a minute. And you feel like you should be the one talking. Maybe let the other person speak. Sometimes that extra pause can allow the person to continue talking. So when you're on a sales call, for example, allow the person to allow a little silence to come so the person can continue telling you why they don't want what you're selling or why they're hesitant, things like that. But it also helps when you're networking, as I said, at conferences and events, when you're meeting new people. This is in my book, by the way, New Business Networking. This is all about how you can use these tools and tips for networking effectively. And then the T in listen stands for test your understanding. This is a big one. And the term that you might be familiar with is, so what you're saying. So what you're saying. So what you're saying is, so if somebody says, hey, Dave, I need this package in 4 boxes and I need it sent in New York and it's got to be there by 5 a.m. on Monday. I say, so what you're saying is you need this package cut up in 4, boxed up and sent to New York. And you said Monday at 5 a.m. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? By repeating the instructions that somebody is speaking to you, somebody is saying to you, it proves that you're testing, it proves that you know what you're talking about. It allows the person to rely on you. They feel confident that, oh, wow, Dave was listening to me. That's great. He knows what I was saying. He was listening to me. That helps. Another really great advantage of doing this is it helps you retain the information. So when you repeat it out loud, it helps you memorize it. This is why when you meet new people, you repeat their names all the time. Oh, nice to meet you, Andy. Oh, it's a pleasure to see you, Andy. Oh, it's great to meet you, Andy. And just saying that, okay, see you later, Andy. Not that many times, of course, in a row, but you say that name of somebody several times and it helps you remember their name. It also makes them feel pretty special. Now, in an improv scene, if you've ever seen an improv show, you'll notice, and I do improv acting as well and improv comedy, where let's say there's like 4 actors on the stage and they're getting ideas from the audience. What we call gives. And they're getting each a profession of what they do. So they ask the audience and the audience says plumber, and the first person's a plumber and the second person's a psychiatrist and the third person's a mechanic and so on. You'll notice in improv shows, they'll repeat it. They may wait until they've done the whole line, and then the first person will say, I'm a plumber, and the next person will say, I'm a mechanic, and the next person will say, I'm a psychiatrist, or something to that effect. And by repeating it, the director of that show allows them to repeat it so that they know what they are and that there's no miscommunication or confusion. And at the same time, the rest of the team also know who they are in case they weren't listening or they missed it. So by repeating this information, it really helps. It also helps with your spouse. The E in listen stands for evaluating the message. So if let's say you're working and someone has confided in you quietly about something that's troubling them, or maybe they're whatever the case may be, something about work, about their personal life, you want to evaluate that message, meaning you want to treat it confidentially. You want to treat it as you should, right? So you need to evaluate that message. Same thing on a stage when you're acting and doing improv is one person might, look sad when they come out on stage. And instead of just running out as the other actor and jumping into the scene, you may want to give that other person a second to kind of establish the scene. And that's when you realize like this person's sad. So, maybe this is a funeral or something like that. And then finally in listen, the N stands for neutralize the feelings. This is a big one when you want to, let's say you're meeting somebody new. Let's say you're meeting a sales prospect and they say something terrible about the Nashville Predators. I'm going to neutralize the feelings. Yes, I don't like the fact that they're bashing my hockey team, but I'm going to neutralize the feelings, right? Now, if they say something, terrible, racist, homophobic, something like that, of course, that's a great opportunity to exit the conversation right away and just, let them be. But neutralizing the feelings means to just, accept that different people are different and have different opinions, and you've got to kind of accept that. So, and the same thing goes with, neutralizing the feelings when you're up on stage doing improv. And again, I'm not suggesting that you all start doing improv, but this stuff is all applicable to the work that you do every day. Many people only know improv from the TV show Whose Line Is It Anyway? And Whose Line Is It Anyway is a great example of improv if you want to see it as performed by actors. There's lots of great games, lots of audience interaction. It's always very funny. But here's the thing about improv, about Whose Line Is It Anyway, is the show is edited. The show is edited so that the best scenes are seen. And with improv, that's not exactly genuine, because with improv, you fail a lot. You're up on stage. You may say something that's not that funny. You may have another actor who doesn't understand what you said because they weren't listening. Anything can happen. That's part of improv. It's also part of life. So you have to embrace failure. You have to expect it. And by doing improv, that's what kept me up on that stage that day that I was, that my slides were advancing on their own. I could have easily run off the stage screaming, or just collapsing right there, or just freezing on stage. And that these things can happen. And with improv, you learn to accept failure. You learn to expect it, even. And you hear lots of great quotes about failure. And this is one of my favorites from Albert Einstein: a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. So if you're not making mistakes, if you're not failing, then you're not trying new things. Now, I'm not saying to, go out there with the whole ambition to fail. That's ridiculous. You don't want to fail. Nobody wants to fail. But if you're not trying new things, if you're not thinking outside of the box, as the old cliche goes, if you're not doing this stuff, then you're never going to advance. You're never going to learn anything new. So you've got to fail. When it comes to improv, I think a lot about jazz music. And if you like jazz, if you've ever watched a band perform jazz, then you'll notice that there's so much improvisation in jazz. But it's the communication they are able to do with one another that allows them to be coherent and sound great together. And so this would be an option. Like, picture yourselves in a sales call, and there's two of you representing the company. You can look at one another and just read somebody from their eyes to know, like, maybe you should shut up and let the other person keep talking, or maybe you should adjust your price, or whatever it may be. This is applicable in improv, especially, and in jazz music, because you'll notice that, like, let's say the saxophone player is doing his solo. He might turn to the drummer and kind of give them a look, indicating that it's the drummer's turn to take over now and do a solo. And so they do the solo. And so if they are listening to each other, and if they are, making eye-to-eye contact and listening with their eyes, even, they can know that it's okay, and to proceed, and not to fear that failure. Another good example is punk rock. Henry Rollins here, the old lead singer of Black Flag, is a huge proponent of improv. In fact, one of my favorite lines of his is, "For the last 30 plus years, I've been doing one long, uninterrupted improv." And that's the thing with punk bands, right? A lot of it is improvised. Yes, the songs are established. Yes, they rehearse and get them right. But once you get to a venue, you never know what's going to happen. Somebody might do something crazy, in the audience, or throw something up on the stage, or the venue may end up being way smaller than it was supposed to be, or way bigger than it was supposed to be. Remember Spinal Tap, that scene in the airport hangar? That's such a great scene. But you've got to improvise, and you've got to go along and go with the flow, and not fear failure. If you want to get ahead, you work on your improv skills. That's a Wharton College quote. And the more that if you Google the words improv and business, and search news, you're going to find tons of different stories. And it seems to be getting more and more popular these days of why improv is just so important and such a great thing. The next thing you want to do with improv is accept. And what I said before about accepting it, the chickens is the good example of accepting the fact that you've got to do it. So you've got to be able to accept the circumstances. So yes, and keep this term in mind. Yes, and so you can do many different things. You can open doors to new opportunities, right? You can just accept opportunities and open those doors. And you can empower employees and improve company culture by thinking about yes and using yes and in your day to day. Yeah, that boardroom example with the CEO, that was a true story. It was pretty rough. And it might have happened to you before. So you've got to think about improv and think about yes and in your day to day at work. And then you become open-minded and you can innovate. You can be open-minded to new opportunities and new ideas that people are asking, and then maybe innovate or even pivot your business to something different that proves you to be way more successful. There's an article recently in the Chicago Tribune. Yes, and Second City Behavioral Science Group studies how improv can create better communication. Heather Caruso, a behavioral scientist and professor who began a partnership in 2017 between the University of Chicago and Second City. It was the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business in Second City in Chicago. They created this thing called the Second Science Project, and they found that there is a direct correlation between improv and enhanced communication. And one of the participants said, I really like the theory of improv and how you can think about the interactions between people. The better you are at improv, it seems, the better you are at interacting with people. And I hope you agree. Using improv, we learn to listen better. And why do we want to listen better? Because we want to become a master communicator and meet our customers' needs. You know, when you're looking for new ideas for content to create, or you're looking for new ideas for solutions to provide your clients with, if you have a customer service department, I highly recommend talking to them and asking them, what are the common questions we get? What are prospects concerned about? What's stopping them from becoming customers? Or for our current customers, what are the problems that they're having? Are they not able to log into our website? Are they not able to make a purchase because of the software we're using on our sites? Or buying products. I worked at a consumer electronics company many years ago, and we would talk to the customer service department all the time, because if there was common questions that customers were having about a specific product, that was an indication that maybe we need to address that. And we would create videos, we would create blog posts, we would create newsletters, FAQs that answered those questions. So we listen better so we can become master communicators that meet our customers' needs. And this is a big one, especially as it applies to networking and dealing with your staff, is making everyone you speak with feel special. Nobody's perfect at networking. I did write a book about it. I do run a website about networking, and I am a big lover of networking when you do it nicely, which is why the website is networkingfornicepeople.com. But I mean, everybody makes mistakes, and I do too. And so the point is, you really want to try to listen and make people feel like that LISTEN acronym I talked about, make them feel special. And one of the best compliments I've ever had was somebody said to me, I really enjoyed meeting you and talking to you at so-and-so conference. And then they added, you made me feel like I was the only one in the room. That should be your goal with everybody you talk to, is make them feel like they're the only one in the room. In an improv scene, you're up there on stage in front of an audience, but you're working with another actor or several actors together on stage to, row a boat out of danger, or to deliver a baby, or to build a house, or whatever it may be. You're working together, and you need to be listening and interacting with your other actors, just as you would with your sales team, with your marketing team, with your HR team, and make everybody feel special that way. And of course, who doesn't love new business and revenue, right? You can develop new business and revenue from listening to these ideas, listening to these challenges, these problems. If customers are having problems, maybe it's about building the solution. And maybe that solution that you've built becomes a product or even a company on its own. These things happen all the time. So as you're listening better, you're going to find new opportunities and new ways that you can develop new business and revenue. This teaches us to be confident, folks. Not fearing failure will make you feel confident. And you don't want to fear failure also because you want to become a nonconformist and original thinker. You want to work with nonconformists and original thinkers. You don't want to be having pushback from people or anything like that, but you want your team to be inspired and be empowered enough to be able to speak up when they have an idea, right? Like the time, as I said, that I had that idea and I raised my hand and that CEO just, made me feel like a jerk. If you're yes-anding your employees, you're going to come up with new ideas. And so you're going to empower them and allow them to maybe think outside of that box, be nonconformists and original thinkers. And that's what you want. You don't want to work with robots, or you would build robots, unless you want to build robots. And you want to become a leader who's admired by their clients, their colleagues, and their staff, right? Obviously, you want this. You want to be admired by your clients. You want them to continue doing business with you. But also you want to build great relationships with them and with your colleagues and with your staff. And you want to take risks and elevate your company by focusing on personal growth, because personal growth, folks, is such an important part that so many companies just ignore. They don't think about allowing a team to grow and to work from one another and to learn from one another. And in the case of using improv in the workplace, this really does empower your team, and it teaches them, how to get better, not just at what they do for a living, but it helps them get better to become better people. I'm sure you would agree with me that if you're listening to your spouse, if you're yes-anding your kids, you're yes-anding your friends, this is going to be, you're going to see the results. You're going to see it firsthand. And not just that, you're going to feel the positivity from it. So your customers, your spouse, your family, your friends, everybody will get, they will enjoy you more because you're accepting opportunities more. You're being more open-minded. And this helps a lot. And so this is a big part of that personal growth of your company and your team. And there's a guy that you may know named Andy Bailey. And this is a line that I love from Andy. Personal growth-oriented companies are automatically goal-oriented, but not the other way around. So if you're focusing on your goals and you're focusing on the people around you and and the communication, of course, this is really what's going to help you. Now, I'm winding this down because I want to be able to interact with you. I want to take your questions. I wanted to allow enough time for you to post questions to me in the chat. So I encourage you to do that now. But I want to thank you all so much. I do run something called the Communication Workshop, the Communication Reboot Workshop. And you can go to communicationreboot.com if you'd like to learn more about that. But I encourage you to email me, dave@futureforth.com. That's the name of my company. Give me a call, send me a text. If you have questions about the workshops that I do with companies and how I teach people and teams how to improve communication using workshops like this,